Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Royal Society of Chemistry Annual General Meeting 2020. I will now hand over to Dr. Helen Payne.
Okay, welcome everybody, and welcome to our virtual event to celebrate the work of the Royal Society of Chemistry and also to welcome our incoming president. So I'm Helen Payne, I'm the Acting Chief Executive of the RSC, and I will be hosting this first part of our event. Now, obviously, this year is a very different environment for all of us, and many of us are going to be working from home, and sadly, our Burlington House venue in central London remains closed. But as part of our commitment to making our meetings accessible to as many members as possible, I'm delighted to be able to extend a very warm welcome to all of you who are participating online through our virtual meeting platform. And as we hit 5 o'clock, I can tell you that 200 members have actually joined us online. So that is actually a record for any of the events that we've held previously associated with our AGM. So thank you very much for joining us. So before we begin our formal annual general meeting at 6 o'clock, I'm delighted to welcome Professor Tom Welton. Tom is Professor of Sustainable Chemistry at Imperial College London, and until recently was the Dean of the Faculty of Natural Science. Tom was elected as our President-elect a year ago in 2019, and in less than an hour and a half will take up his role as President at the AGM. He joins us now to give a talk on sustainable chemistry, chemistry for a common future. So thank you very much, Tom, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Helen. And thank you to everybody for coming to listen to this. So the reason I'm giving this presentation on sustainable chemistry is partly because, as you heard from Helen, it is my day job, but also because you're going to hear a lot about sustainability and sustainable chemistry over the next 2 years of my presidency. And what I wanted to do was not necessarily give a super in-depth technical discussion of what sustainable chemistry is, but to give you my view of it so that you can see a little bit about the kind of things that we might be doing around sustainability in the future, in the next 2 years. So next slide, please. So this woman is Gro Brundtland, and she led the UN World Commission on Environment and Development, which in 1987 produced an incredibly influential report called Our Common Future. And it really set the scene for what became known as sustainable development, and particularly as we moved into the beginning of this century, the Sustainable Development Goals, which were part of the Millennium Goals of the UN. And the thing that this report is perhaps most famous for is this very simple statement that I've got here, which is sustainable development is to meet the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And I think the reason that it's taken hold is because it's a very simple and elegant description of what we will be trying to achieve in sustainable development. But that's really quite a superficial look at it. And even thinking just about the words that are here, then, to meet the needs, what does needs mean? Does needs mean simple subsistence? Or does needs mean to have a lifestyle of the type that I have here in central London, and and life quantity, to have expect to have the same lifestyle that someone like me would expect to have. So immediately, it's not quite as simple as it first seems. So next slide, please. Well, so sustainable chemistry, then actually it does become pretty straightforward, which is we can think of sustainable chemistry as two things. And it is important that we think of it as two things. The first is the implementation of the concept of sustainability in the production and use of chemicals. And that's really rather similar to the description that you might give for green chemistry, which of course has very much come forward as a field during this century. But there is a very important and. And the and is the application of chemistry and chemical products to enable sustainable development to happen at all. And that really is a point at which the idea of sustainable chemistry does deviate from the idea of green chemistry, not in a negative way, it's just, it's slightly different. But I'd like to return again to that meeting the needs of future generations. And I've always loved this quote from Niels Bohr, which is, prediction is very difficult, especially if it's about the future. And so let's have a little look at that. So next slide, please. So here's a picture. It was taken in St. Mark's Square in 2005. And next slide, please. And there is a picture taken from almost precisely the same place in 2013. And you can clearly see the difference as you see all of those screens lit up, well, practically lighting up the night. And so in a very short period of time, we have gone from, in fact, 8 years, we've gone from one of those pictures to the other. And of course, what we're seeing is our smartphones. And the thing about our smartphones that really enables them to happen is, of course, the swipey screen. And so our smartphones have on them a screen that we can see through. And when we touch it, we can give instructions to our internet-enabled device. It almost seems to be strange nowadays that I call my mobile phone a phone, because it's probably the least of its capabilities is that I can actually make a telephone call on it, and these fully internet-enabled devices. So let's have a little look at how those screens have been enabled. So next slide, please. So here you can see a piece of work that was done a few years ago in collaboration with the RSC. And these are the elements that you can find inside a smartphone. So there are electronics, so copper, silver, gold, tantalum, all sorts of different, the lanthanides, actinides, main group. There's no part of the periodic table that we don't find inside our mobile phones. But there's something very particular that I want to point out to you. And so next slide, please. And there they are. And so this is the screen. And so the screen is partly composed of an alumosilicate glass, as you might expect. But in that screen, there is a thin layer of indium tin oxide. And the thing about indium tin oxide is it is both conducting and transparent. And it being transparent, what that does, it allows us to see the things that are on our screen. And being conducting is the thing that enables us to touch the screen where, frankly, the sweat on our fingers will. That's why when you try and use your screen with the rubber on the end of a pencil, it doesn't work. Because you need to have your skin be conducting, and the indium tin oxide conducting layer allows us to give an instruction to the telephone with our fingers. And so in 8 years, when I give this bit of the presentation sometimes on schools talks that I do, I'll often ask them to put their hands up if they are willing to give me their smartphone, and they all do have smartphones, and allow me to stamp on it. And of course, no hands go up. And so in just a few years, we have gone from, frankly, nobody caring about indium at all to it being part of our everyday lives, an absolutely crucial part of our everyday lives, because when I ask young people, they have no intention of giving up their mobile phones. And indeed, our mobile phones have solved sustainability problems that we thought we were going to have and didn't. And so, I can remember back in the 1990s, we'd regularly have a discussion of how are you going to lay enough telephone cables across continents like Africa to enable them to join the modern telecommunications world? Well, the answer is you're not, because they've leapfrogged that technology, and it's mobile phone technology which dominates across Africa, and it's mobile telephone technology which is, as I say, enabled by this indium tin oxide, and indium suddenly becoming an extremely important element to us. Well, is there any problem with that? So next slide, please. So many of you will be familiar with this version of the periodic table, which was launched by UCHEMS last year as part of the International Year of the Periodic Table. And for those of you that aren't familiar with it, you'll have noticed that it's quite a peculiar shape. And the reason for that is because it's trying to communicate to you the abundance of the 90 natural elements that we have around us. And I should say that the boxes are they're a logarithmic scale. So twice the size means 10 times the abundance. And we also see you've got a variety of colors, and you can see, so there's green, and green means there's plenty of it. We can't imagine at any point that element becoming an element at risk. Then there's the yellows. The yellows are, well, do you know what? There may at some future point be a risk to that element, but really in any foreseeable medium to long-term future, we still think of that as an abundant element, given how we use it. And that, of course, is the important point, given how we use it. And then finally, there's the amber, which means that, over the next however many decades, we may see increased use. And if we do see increased use, we would consider these to be elements at risk. And, you see, for instance, the kind of catalytic metals here, as the catalytic converters leave just being something of the rich nations and are distributed across the world, the kind of elements that get used in those will become more at risk. But there are plenty of elements that are already, given how we use them, at serious threat in the next 100 years. And so next slide, please. And if you see down here, here we find indium. So indium has gone from being an element that, well, wasn't really part of our everyday lives to being an element that we all rely on all day, every day. And it is under serious threat given how we use it. So how do we predict the future? If we don't know what materials our grandchildren are going to require, far more than 8 years apart, in decades away, how can we predict what will and won't be sustainable? The next slide, please. So that brings me on to this definition of sustainable chemistry, which, I've kind of been knocking around with since, I don't know, about the end of the first decade of this century, to try and resolve that. And for me, it really started in the idea of bringing the benefits of modern chemistry and chemical products to all communities. It seems to me that that really is what our part of development is. And in so doing, and I do like these, they come from István Horváth, and he likens it to, rather than thinking about the absolute amounts, thinking about the rates of use. And so in bringing the benefits of modern chemistry, we need to use less stuff. And that means to consume nature's resources at a rate that is lower than that at which they can be naturally replenished. And also to make less waste, and that's to produce waste at a rate which is less than that at which it can be naturally remediated. If we can manage those two things in delivering the first, then we really will be bringing about a sustainable chemistry. So next slide, please. Right, so I decided to look at plastics a little bit now, and part of the reason for that is, of course, David Attenborough. And it's remarkable that, you know, many people have been talking about the plastics problem for a long, long time. And, you know, frankly, being cast as, you know, people like me being cast as some kind of tree-hugging hippie. And then in one television programme, something happened across, well, not only the nation, but also started happening across the world, where people's ideas changed. And it really does show the power of communication of science to the public in helping us meet these challenges. And of course, now we know that plastics are everywhere. So next slide, please. And just to, you know, reinforce that point, the photographs that I've got here, so these are from beaches on a place called Henderson Island. And if you look at the map on the bottom left-hand side of the slide, that's where Henderson Island is. And in spite of the fact of being just about as far away from any major conurbation as you could possibly be, on Henderson Island, the group found 37.7 million items weighing 17.6 tons of plastic on the beaches. And that's about 350 items per square metre, in spite of the fact that this is as far away from any great conurbation that you can imagine. Next slide, please. And of course, there's a reason why plastics are everywhere, and that's because they're everywhere. You know, I think it really is true to say that, you know, the second half of the 20th, and certainly now, we still are in, you know, the plastics world. We use plastics for absolutely everything. And if you look on the left-hand side of the screen, so this pie chart is showing you the product of a typical petrochemical refinery that is not fuel. So we put the fuel to one side. Of course, that is the vast majority of the stuff that comes out of a petrochemical refinery, but about somewhere between 10 and 15% of it is carbon that gets used in materials and chemicals that we use. And if you look at that pie chart, you can immediately see why there's a problem with plastics. And that's because 80% of the carbon that we use from petrochemical sources is plastics. So that's a huge, huge amount, you know, simply a huge, huge amount of stuff. Next slide, please. And so one of the ways in which it's dealt with is by the idea of the 3 R's. And, you know, you are already familiar with this. And so the first of the 3 R's is to reduce. And here are some examples of reductions that have been brought about. And so, you know, people of my age remember, you know, boxes that were, you could just about carry them even when you were a strapping young 18-year-old lad, full of washing powder, that can now have this same material benefit from something that's a 500 milliliter liquid bottle. And so, of course, that's not only less material in the sense of the product itself. Very importantly for the discussion of plastics, it's much, much, much less packaging. In terms of energy, it's much less energy required to to move a lighter weight of material around the country. And there have even recently been further improvements on that. And so another one that we see now in our supermarkets are the idea of refills. And you can actually see it on the, that's why I use this picture. You can see that the eco refill pack for this hand washing product, I won't say the name, is 75% less plastic than the original bottle itself. And so again, a very large reduction in the amount of material and the amount, and particularly the amount of plastics. And then on the far left, there's a recent one which I quite like. And so here, in this particular liquid formulation, of course, most of what's in most liquid formulations is water. And so what this company has done is not only provide a refill, but provided a refill of the active ingredients that you add to water that you've put back in the bottle yourself. And so that water never gets, transported around on the backs of trucks, and so has a great energy saving. There is, of course, the plastic saving also of having a much smaller bottle. So reduce is happening all around us. Of course, there's an interaction between the chemicals industry and us as consumers, which I won't go into today, but is very complicated. But there is something that we can do, not only in our professional capacities, but in our personal capacities, to have reduced the first of the 3 R's. And then the second one, reuse. And so again, this is something which is becoming much, much more common. And so instead of having a instantly disposable carrier bag, we've all got used to bags for life, or as they're variously called. You see, I mean, particularly young people, working around the college, I think that the only thing that my undergraduates are more attached to than their mobile phones are their water bottles, which they fill up from a tap, as opposed to buying expensive bottled water. And of course, very recently, we're getting very familiar with the reusable coffee cup. Interesting that in the last few months, there have been movements back on some of these, as the consumer has started to feel more comfortable again with disposables, with the idea that in some way a cleaned reusable cup is going to be more likely to lead to infection than a washable one. And of course, if it's washed properly, you will know that there is no problem. And then the next slide, please. And finally, recycling. And of course, again, something that we've all become familiar with. And of course, the difference between reuse, so reuse is using the product for the thing that was initially designed to be, and recycling is turning the product from being a waste into something else. And here I give an example of a bag for life, but there are many things that PET can be recycled into. So all these are things that not only, as I say, not only can we do in our professional capacity, but we can do as individuals as well. Next slide, please. And so back to the idea of plastics are everywhere. And so here are some quite frightening numbers. And so this is an analysis of what's happened to all of the plastics that we've ever made. And if you look at the left-hand side, the numbers there are in millions of metric tons. So that's 8.3 billion metric tons of plastics that have been through primary production. Of those, about 2.5 billion are still in use, because of course not every plastic is instantly disposable. I can look around my house and see plastics that are decades old. Very little recycled. Only 600 million metric tons in all that time be recycled, and most are just discarded. And if you look at the graph on the right-hand side, what you can see there is, so the black line is the expectation up until 2050 of the production of plastics if we carry on at the same rate. And the red line is the rate at which we expect plastics to be discarded, with a uptick in the proportion of plastics that will be incinerated, but still no great divergence away from waste being discarded. So next slide, please. And of course, the RSC has been doing stuff around this, because if we are to have plastics in our lives in the future, which we absolutely will need to have, there are many things that we can't do without plastics. And this is a report that you can find on the RSC website. The Science to Enable Sustainable Plastics report has picked on 4 challenges. And the first one is to, actually to understand the impacts that plastics have on different parts, during different parts of their life cycles, to develop new sustainable plastics that might be plastics that are better designed for recycling. It might be biodegradable plastics. It might be plastics from natural resources. And then, of course, the big one of closed loop plastics recycling. So that is that you bring the plastics back round to being able to be used. And so one of the things that you might see under that, for instance, is there's a lot of work at the moment at looking at whether PET, those plastic bottles, can be depolymerized back to the starting materials from which PET is made, in order to then make fresh PET. And then you get away from this problem of every time you recycle something, it degrading. We're very familiar with that with paper, isn't it? You have very high quality printer paper, then it becomes newspapers, and then we flush it down the toilet. And then the final one is around that idea of biodegradation. And so that's understanding and being able to control plastic degradation. Next slide, please. So even in the world in which I've been talking about the products that we have, for every 1 kilogram of the waste that we have in our households, 5 kilograms of waste was generated in the making of those products. And so that is, if you like, a measure of the wastefulness of the chemicals production. Next slide, please. And so that brings us to measuring sustainability. So of course, if you think about the definition that we've been working with, there is no measure of the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And so what we have is a series of properties. And because of that, those large amounts of waste, there is a lot of concentration across the chemical industries and chemicals and chemical academia in what you would call mass-based proxy measurements. And and this one is just it's pretty much the first example, which was the E factor, which was introduced by Roger Sheldon. And this one looks at the ratio of waste to to product. And what you can see, and I remember I was at the meeting where he revealed this slide, and the murmur that went around it as different industry sectors felt they were being more or less told off. And what you can see is that various different parts of the chemical sector have very different amounts of waste production. And all I want to say on this is, so the fourth column is one, or the last column on the right hand side is one that I've added myself. And what you can see here is the number of synthesis steps, which is typically used in that sector to make a product. And what you can also see is the E factor scales very well with the number of synthesis steps. And what it in fact transpires is that it's not the number of synthesis steps, it's the number of isolations that you do on the way to making your final product. And that is the issue of solvent. Next slide, please. So this is the slide that I'm going to leave you on. And actually, the idea of sustainable development has developed. And now we talk about sustainable development in terms of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, of which there are 17. I won't go through them. You can see them here. I should say there's a fantastic editorial written by David Cole-Hamilton in Chemistry European Journal, where he goes through many of these, pointing out how chemistry can tackle the issue of that particular sustainability goal, whether it be no poverty or zero hunger, decent work. But what I would say, I'd go even beyond that. What I would say is there is no part of these that chemistry and chemical sciences can't contribute to. And that's what we'll be thinking about over the next 2 years. We've been thinking about it already. It's not a new idea. And that's what I would like you to think about in your practice and your profession. And so with that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tom. That was a fascinating presentation. Just to say to all those on the line, this webinar is being recorded. It will be available after our meeting this afternoon. And also, if you have colleagues who want to tune in to hear Tom speak, then that's absolutely fine. So if you know of anybody who will have missed this afternoon's presentation, then we can share that later. And just as a quick update for those who have joined us, we now have 400 members online listening to Tom, but I very much hope to encourage you to stay with us, especially for our AGM at 6 o'clock. Now, Tom, I know that you said at the beginning that you would be keen to take any questions. Because of the practicalities of the platform we're using, there is an opportunity to ask Tom questions. If we're unable to answer them during this presentation or this the next hour or so, then we will follow up with the answer to those questions after we finish recording. And I'm sure, Tom, you'd be happy to kind of take any of those at that point. But before we begin the formal part of the AGM, we did want to take some time to talk through some highlights from the past 2 years and also look ahead to the next 2 years. And Tom, I was very pleased the fact that you highlighted our recent report on plastics. You mentioned about sustainability, which is obviously one of our policy areas that we are working through, and we hope to bring to our community a lot more on that work over the next 2 years. But it's also very good to look back over the last 2 years, and of course, especially as we think about last year in terms of what we as an organisation achieved. So I would like to welcome now Carol. Professor Dame Carol Robinson is our president, and she holds the chair of Dr. Lee's Professor of Chemistry at the University of Oxford. Carol herself is a graduate of the Royal Society of Chemistry and has worked with us for many years and is very much a champion of the profession of chemistry, but also of technicians, which formed a key part of her presidency. So welcome, Carol. And we're going to have a conversation shortly just to kind of find out more from both yourself and Tom about the highlights of your presidency, the highlights of the last couple of years, and then looking at the next couple of years as well. But the Royal Society of Chemistry, so we have a very clear purpose, and that's about advancing the chemical sciences. And each year we deliver our purpose through an ambitious programme of work, much of which Tom just touched on. And that's across publishing, education, policy, outreach, both in the UK, but also very importantly, internationally. And this enables us to disseminate knowledge, champion our profession, and also amplify the voice of chemistry. And of course, none of this would be possible and couldn't be achieved without the support and hard work of our community. So that's importantly our members, our volunteers, our authors, our referees, and of course our staff team. But I would just like to make a very special thank you to all the members who have worked with us. And Tom, you highlighted the International Year of the Periodic Table. We couldn't have achieved some of the things that we did last year to celebrate that without the excellent work of our members around the world. So thank you very much for that. Now, usually at this time, we would provide printed copies of our trustees' report and also our financial statements for 2019. Now, obviously, you'll fully appreciate this isn't practical at this point in time, not least because of the impact of COVID, but also because of not having access to our offices. But you can find the full report on our website. However, to bring some of our achievements to life, we've created a short animation highlighting just a few of the things that we are very proud of.
In 2019, we achieved more than ever, fulfilling 3 core roles for the global chemistry community. We launched our new education website. We completed the first phase of the Yusuf Hamid Inspirational Chemistry Programme. And received a further generous commitment from Dr. Hamid to continue the programme. we recognised and celebrated a wide range of chemistry professionals. Profession in numbers. ...3,000 researchers at our 5th Twitter poster conference. We awarded £2.5 million in grants. We led and accelerated chemistry's transition to open access. We commissioned an animation explaining impacts of Plan S to researchers and produced a panel discussion with researchers about Plan S. Reached 5,000 open access articles in chemical science. Up to 80 transformative read and publish agreements with institutions. We launched RSC Chemical Biology, a gold OA journal. Knowledge in numbers. We challenged and influenced government policy. We supported the creation of Commonwealth chemistry. We published our landmark research into the future of chemistry, Science Horizons. We set out our plan to rethink recognition. Commissioned an independent review of our recognition portfolio. Committed to a 5-point action plan to reward and recognise a new, more inclusive definition of excellence. We launched our bullying and harassment support line. We gained global media coverage for our Elements in Danger campaign. Celebrating the International Year of the Periodic Table. 2019 was the UN International Year of the Periodic Table. The Chemists Community Fund was set up to alleviate poverty. In 2019, we made more charitable grants and helped more people in more ways than ever before. Together, our members, our staff and our wider community, we've had a fantastic 2019. Thank you.
So I hope you've all enjoyed watching that video, just reflecting on our recent achievements, and I hope you'll agree that it is something to be proud of. And I think as a community, we do such a phenomenal job to help support the chemical sciences, but also to promote the chemical scientists worldwide. So Carol, I'd just like to come to you, because I know that the last 2 years you've been very active as our current president, and you've been involved in many aspects of the work that we do. But I wonder if you could just share with us for a few minutes your own reflections on your 2 years as president. Just unmute.
Yep, first thing. Good evening, everybody. And I have to say it's been a real privilege to be the president of the Society for the last 2 years. I've enjoyed many of the aspects, and I'm extremely proud of many of the things, all of the things that we've done, but especially proud of some of them, which have been real highlights, in my opinion, which are particularly the technicians' commitment. I always wanted to pay back to the Royal Society of Chemistry for their tremendous support and confidence that they gave to me as a technician. And I feel that I've sort of come full circle and tried to pay that back now. And it's also been a real privilege to be the president during the time of the Breaking the Barriers report, which I thoroughly enjoyed and thought that really set the stage for some change in the right direction. So I was extremely happy to be involved in that. And then just generally being part of the society, it's been such a privilege to work with the staff and the leadership team at Burlington House, with all of the very friendly people that I met in Burlington House, which I'm going to miss a great deal. And if they are online, a huge thank you to all of you. And when I look back, I am very proud of many things, but there's always this thing, well, I could have worked harder, I could have done more. And so I always slightly carry that, but I am very proud of what I've done. And I know that all the work that I started will be continued in the very safe hands of Tom. So yeah, thank you. I think that's all I'm going to say for now.
Thank you, Carol. And of course, I've been with you for much of the work that you've done as president. And I think we were talking earlier about remembering back to just before we went into lockdown, we held 2 events, one to celebrate technicians and the signing of the technicians' commitment, the second one for International Women's Day, that we had a conversation that helped share, I think, both of our experiences with kind of the wider community. Carol, is there if you had to pick out any particular event or activity or even visit that you may have kind of made during your 2 years as president, is there anything in particular that you would just like to kind of highlight?
I think going to the technicians conference, I really enjoyed that because the excitement in the room, I just thought, yeah, I remember this excitement when I was a technician. And sometimes when you go to an academic conference, you don't get quite that same buzz of excitement. People are behaving in a different way. But I found the technicians conference an extremely exciting thing to go to. So that was a real highlight for me in Nottingham.
And I think sharing personal experience, I think, always goes down really, really well with those that we're talking to. Thank you, Carol. Just coming to you, Tom, I wonder if you could share with us your personal highlights of some recent RSC achievements.
First of all, thank you to Carol for what you've just said. I think, well, only this week, you know, the Digital Futures report that really shows in many ways the RSC operating at its best, a report that was done in conjunction between the membership volunteers and the scientific teams itself, putting the report together, then combined with the fantastic work of the communications team. And so on Sunday night, there it was on the news on BBC One. And so that I think was a remarkable thing at this time to get chemistry put front and centre. And of course, those kind of science reports go alongside the diversity related reports that we're also well known for. The one I'd like to pick out from those at the moment is the framework for action in scientific publishing. And what I like about that report is it's making the transition from pointing out what the problem is to really coming up with what the solutions could be. And of course, in scientific publishing, in part of the world in which we, the RSC, have incredible impact and influence. I think it should be mentioned the successful transition to the RSC working from home, which has been incredible, and all of the staff are to be thanked for the way in which they've committed to this so wholeheartedly. And I should say, at the time at which lockdown happened, I had a paper that was in the process of being reviewed. And if I didn't know that the RSC had moved to working from home, there was no evidence from that side of it that any disruption had happened at all. I mean, it was fantastically smooth. I think the other thing I should highlight is the election that we have just had. So there was a real possibility that, so my election would have been, some one-off, and then in subsequent years we'd have, only got, one person who wished to take up the presidency. And we had an amazing group of people who put their head above the parapet, and it is putting your head above the parapet, to put themselves forward for the presidency. Any one of the 5 of them would have made a fantastic president. And so I hope that the elections go from strength to strength. What I would only ask the membership, and it's perhaps, the people on this call are probably very much the people who did vote, but I would encourage everybody that these elections are real and important, and we want to grow the number of people who actually vote in them.
Thank you, Tom. I have to support everything that you've just said, so thank you. And I think you're absolutely right. The voting and voting by members is so important to the organisation, and also to our future kind of plans that we have. So Tom, thinking now ahead to your presidency, because in less than an hour you will be our president, what are your priorities going to be?
Well, so I should say, although of course it will be an important thing that we will be dealing with in the, certainly next few months and probably next few years, I don't want to be the president who did COVID. It will be important, but I think it's equally important that we maintain our strategic aims and our strategic visions. And of course, diversity and inclusion are not going to go away. That will still be a major part of what we do. And I mean diversity in all its forms. So not just protected characteristics of particular people or otherwise, but the diversity of routes into becoming a professional chemical scientist. So Carol already mentioned the technician commitment, but also having more of an idea of a diversity of what success is, and that success doesn't always need to look like the same thing, and that we should be supporting people across all of their ambitions for what success is for them. So that remains key. And of course, you've just heard a half-hour talk on sustainability. The reason for that is because it is something which is of great importance to me. It's of great importance to the society, and it is of great importance to society. And I think that will be the other major theme.
Absolutely, Tom. And I'm seeing lots of questions come through, which unfortunately we may not quite get around to answering them all. But one of the key ones coming through is actually how will COVID impact on sustainability? So I think that's something that we as an organisation will need to give thought to. And I'm sure that you will be covering as part of your kind of next couple of years.
Would you like me to answer that now?
I think if you can do that quickly, that'd be great.
So very interesting. A couple of weeks ago, I was contacted by a journalist from Bloomberg who do a lot of the kind of commercial journals, and she's talking to me because a report had come through that what had happened as COVID spread around the world, and it had happened at the same times in the various different epidemics. So after a few weeks of the virus being present and the epidemic starting to take hold in a region, people stopped buying natural, green, eco cleaning products and absolutely went back to the old-fashioned stuff in some belief that if it came from a non-natural, non-eco bottle, it must be better at cleaning. And of course, my interview with her was about, it's not the source of the product that determines whether it's any good at cleaning, it's the property of the product. And so it does have impacts. So, I saw an item on the local news here last week, which was saying an entirely new part of litter has started to appear in the Thames estuary, and that's face masks and gloves. And so there are certainly short-term impacts. We will discover how consumers operate in the in the medium term. And as the chemical sciences, what we absolutely need to do is to ensure that there aren't long-term negative impacts, particularly for things that they don't need to be around COVID.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom. I wonder if I can just come back to Carol. You've heard Tom's priorities for the next couple of years, and obviously the focus on sustainability. What would you like to see continued from your own kind of 2 years as president that should be continued and reinvigorated and maybe even expanded that you'd like Tom to take forward?
Yeah, I think Tom's already picked up on them, which is the diversity and the technicians, which are my two favourite things. But I also thought I don't want him to be defined as the COVID president. And I don't think he will be, because it's the way you respond to things that counts, not the actual action that happens. So I think your response has been great, and looking at sustainability with COVID is going to be an incredibly important thing. So COVID won't define you, I promise you. And my other sort of advice is try to enjoy this time and really embrace all the opportunities that come your way, because when you get to leaving, you just think, oh, I should have done more, and it's a sort of regret, but also you can feel quite proud. But I think the more you put in, the more you get back. And I know you're going to make a great president, so I have absolutely no worries. Handing over to you. I wish I had the thing to pass, but you can have my necklace.
Yes, unfortunately, we have no medal to pass over in a virtual world. So I think that just highlights the ambition that you have for the organisation and that we as a whole have for the organisation. And one that stood the test of time, because we have to constantly adapt and we have to change and we have to respond to the environment we find ourselves in. So let's watch for the first time in public our story, which is about looking into the future, adapting and succeeding. So we'll share a video with you now.
From the birth of the Industrial Revolution to the future of sustainable prosperity, the chemical sciences are at the heart of human progress.
The pace of change is incredible, driven in part by the amazing discoveries and advances in science and technology.
The Royal Society of Chemistry's purpose has always been to advance the chemical sciences. We champion the chemistry profession, setting standards and celebrating excellence.
We share chemical knowledge, publishing the best research and bringing scientists together to connect and collaborate. And we use our voice for chemistry, speaking up for the chemical sciences in the public interest.
We are a community of 50,000 members across the globe that celebrates our differences, working together with a common purpose to realize a better world.
Our purpose is unwavering. But as the world changes, we constantly evolve how we advance the chemical sciences.
Science is an international endeavor, and we live in an increasingly globalized world.
We've expanded our presence from our historic London headquarters and Cambridge hub to a network of offices across the world, from Beijing to Berlin, Shanghai to Bangalore.
Technological advances continually raise scientists' expectations of what is possible.
We use advanced technologies and data science to help researchers unearth and share knowledge faster and more effectively than ever before. And we bring together visionaries to explore how digital technologies will allow us to discover unexplored frontiers and make sure the next generation of chemical scientists are equipped for the future.
As a professional body for chemistry and a champion of chemistry professionals everywhere, we've broadened our horizons and recognize an increasing diversity of skilled and passionate people.
As society recognizes and begins to tackle many social injustices and discrimination, we are proud to have bolstered our own research and action to make chemistry a more inclusive community, accessible to everyone.
These ever-developing factors of globalization, technology, and inclusivity have a huge impact on the way scientists need to share and access research.
In response, we'll make research more open and accessible on a global scale. As society changes, chemistry must change also.
Historically, the Royal Society of Chemistry has successfully adapted to support our community's shifting needs.
And will continue to look to the future and ensure everyone can benefit from all that the chemical sciences will bring to society.
Let's advance chemistry together.
So I hope you all enjoyed watching the video. That will be live on our website shortly after we finish tonight's proceedings. And if you want to point anybody else in the direction of the video, then we'd be delighted for you to share that more widely. So whilst I still have Tom with us before we move into the AGM at 6 o'clock, Tom, I'm going to ask you, what is it you're most looking forward to about being president?
Well, I mean, this is terribly true, but I do hope we get back to having a party or two. And, you know, and one of the things that I've been involved with the RSC for a long, long time, and I really enjoy meeting our volunteers, and they're just an incredible bunch of people who do amazing things, often in a very unsung sort of way. And, you know, the people that mean that our local sections can function. And so really, I'm looking forward to working with our volunteers ever more closely, and also to talk to the wider membership and trying to work out how we can meet the needs of them as we go forward with changing technologies, changing times. But also, I think one of the things that is true of me, and I think it's true of, when I ask people who are volunteers for the RSC, and I say, well, how did you get involved? The vast majority of them say, somebody asked me. And I think that, you know, I'm really looking forward for us to be able to work out ways of finding just what is the right volunteering opportunity for you, this individual member, and so that somebody will ask you to get involved, and then you know, people will have the opportunity to do great stuff, but also, as Carol kind of said, have great fun with the people who are volunteers for the RSC. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to.
Excellent. And I think, Tom, you know, we would normally have been doing our regional meetings at this point in time. We'd been out around the UK meeting with members and actually travelling more, you know, across the world as well. So I think there will be those opportunities again. And I think it would be great for you to have the chance to kind of work directly with members. And I'd say to any member who is listening in this afternoon that, you know, there are many opportunities to volunteer with the RSC, and I know that many of you already do, but the more that we can engage our community, the more impact we'll have as the RSC, and the more impact we'll have for the chemical sciences as well. So I think, Tom, you're going to have a fun 2 years.
I hope so.
Be great working with you. So I'd just like to thank both Carol and Tom for joining us for those questions. We're very shortly going to be moving into the formal AGM agenda. So I do hope that you will all stay on the line for that part of this afternoon's proceedings. We'll also be sharing with you the results of the elections. So obviously, many of you will participate in the recent elections for President-elect, but also the elections across our divisions and some of our governance boards and committees as well. At the end of this evening, we'll also be sharing some special messages from our new honorary fellows. Normally, and Tom just mentioned the summer party that we host at Burlington House, that's an opportunity to celebrate with our community, but in particular to welcome our honorary fellows into membership. As we can't hold that event this year for obvious reasons, some of them have very kindly recorded videos for us, and we're going to share those with you shortly. So before we hand over to Carol to take us through the annual general meeting, I'm just going to finish on one question for Tom. So I can see that we have had a whole host of questions come through, Tom, on your presentation, but I'm just going to pick on one in particular, and this is from Emily Radley. And her question is, how do you think human sustainability features within sustainable planning for the future?
Oh, human sustainability. So there are many ways in which you can view that. And so one is population. You know, we do still have an expanding population, and we are going to have an expanding population in the foreseeable future. It sort of looks like it's starting to top out sometime around halfway through this century. And so what that means is that we need to, in order to meet the needs of future generations, we need to get more from less. And so that is a key element of sustainability. Part of it is, of course, one of the things that I didn't talk about in Reduce is one of the things that's happening now, and you can see it on social media and the like, is many people are starting to think very carefully about the things that they use and whether they really are necessary. And, this might be, the whole world of personal care products, for instance. So there's ways in which we as humans can respond to the need for sustainability in order to reduce our overall impact upon the environment.
Thank you, Tom. So I guess what you're saying, we all play our part.
Yeah.
And there's a role for all of us. So please keep asking your questions. Tom will be able to answer them all following this afternoon. If possible, we might even be able to record some of the answers for you so that we can share those online as well. So thank you very much. I am now going to hand over to our president, Professor Dame Carol Robinson, who is going to lead on the proceedings for the formal annual general meeting. Thank you, Carol.
Good evening. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Tom. And good evening. So this now becomes more formal. And this is the annual general meeting. And I'd like to welcome you all. It's great to have so many people online. I hope you haven't dropped off. This is very important that you stay. So this is our opening procedure. And it's a little different this year because we've got to go through some technicalities of how to do this virtual meeting. So first of all, welcome. And according to the attendance, we have a quorum. I don't know what it is now, but I'm hoping you're all still there. So I have pleasure in declaring the meeting open. For those who've just joined for the AGM, I extend a warm welcome to our virtual meeting platform. The AGM notice was circulated to members with the June edition of Chemistry World and was published on the RSC website. We will be voting on two items today: Trustees' Report and Financial Statements 2019, which is item 3, and the appointment of the auditors, which is item 5. So I just need to explain to you the voting procedures. So the voting icon appears on the navigation bar. I'm hoping you can all find this. And once you click on this, the resolutions will appear on your screen, along with the for, against, and withheld voting options. Simply select any one of those to cast your vote. If you change your mind, which you're perfectly allowed to do, you simply select another option, and you can change your mind as many times as you like until the close of the poll. Your vote will have been submitted when the voting option icon changes color, having selected it, and a vote received message appears. There's no final submit button as the voting is live. Any person attending the meeting is having difficulties. There is a user guide that has been prepared that you can access through the platform on the information tab, and that should help you address any questions that you have. So voting on the resolutions is open now, and you can vote at any time during the proceedings until I declare that the vote is closed. We'll also take the opportunity for questions, and I noticed that you started to submit questions, which is great. Please carry on. Now using the online meeting platform, which we will address later in the proceedings. So if you wish to ask a question, please click on the message icon located at the bottom of your screen. And if you're viewing it from a phone, or top of your screen if you're viewing it from your PC or laptop, type your message, ask the question in the Ask a Question box, and click the arrow button on the right-hand side of the message box. I hope that is all crystal clear. Moving on to the agenda. The first item, as is always the case, is I invite the meeting to convey our thanks to the Royal Society of Chemistry's patron, Her Majesty the Queen. Royal greetings noted. I invite you to note that a summary report of the AGM held on the 10th of July 2019 was published in Update in August 2019, pages 3 and 4, a version now also available on the RSC website. So item 3 on the agenda is the financial statements for the year ending the 31st of December 2019. And for this, I would like to invite Paul Satchell to present the trustees' report and financial statements to you.
Hello, everybody. The next slide, please. Hello, everybody. I'm Paul Satchell. I have the privilege to be the Honorary Treasurer of the Royal Society of Chemistry. My task this evening is to give you some of the financial highlights from our performance in 2019 and to give you the opportunity to ask questions. The slide you can see shows the annual report, which is available online. What we should highlight, I think, really is it was a very clean audit. There were no issues raised by our auditors. And what that tells you is that we have both reliable numbers and strong financial controls. The financial controls are important because it means that you can be confident that monies earned or donated to the Society will be well cared for and will go to be spent on benefiting chemists and chemistry. On the next slide, we look at the revenue for 2019. Total revenue was a little over 67 million, that's up 6% on 2018. And surprisingly, it's dominated by the publishing business, which generated around 57 million pounds of income. That's 86% of the total. Membership income, that's the light blue slice of the pie, represented a little over 4 million, that's 6% of the total. And a little over 5 million came from fundraising and conferences. On the next slide, we show the expenditure for the year, which was a little over 65 million, up 10% on 2018. Unsurprisingly, publishing, the dark blue pie makes up the majority of that at 39 million, it's 60% of the total. But you would also note that the light blue pie, which is expenditure on membership, was almost 6 million. That's 9% of the total. We spend more on membership activities than membership income, as you'll note. Charitable activities, including education and other charitable activities like conferences and advocacy, total around about 30% of the total, something of the order of 20 million pounds in that year. The next slide shows the operating surplus, which is the small difference between the two large numbers that we were looking at. That's down 2.3 million on the previous year. That's simply because we spent more on our charitable spending. It's one of the aims of the RSC is to increase our charitable spending, and we were able to do that in 2019. Moving on to the next slide, you can see how the investment portfolio performed during the year. The investment portfolio had a strong 2019 following a challenging year in 2018. The portfolio ended the year at 108 million, that's up around about 9 million year to year. That includes 1.6 million of new investment from excess cash within the RSC's treasury, but also includes 1 million of income from within the portfolio and 7.6 million of investment gains. Now, what that represents in terms of investment performance is 5 percentage points above the retail price index. The target that we set for the organisation's investment portfolio is 2 percentage points above the retail price index. So it was, in all senses, a strong year, and we were pleased with the performance. Now, the investment portfolio is one of the ways in which we look after the reserves of the Society, which are delineated in the next slide. The total reserves of the Society as of the end of last year at 122 million, that's up a little over 8 million on the year. That includes an operating surplus of 1.6 million and the investment gains. Now, there are more than one class of reserves. We should start by explaining the yellow, the 24 million pounds restricted funds. Those are funds which have very strict rules on how they are invested and for what use they can be put. And most of that is actually the Chemist Community Fund, better known as the Benevolent Fund. Outside restricted funds, there are around about 98 million of unrestricted funds. 40 million of that are general free reserves for contingency funds and protect the RSC and its charitable activities against unforeseeable risks and risks we can foresee, such as the disruption coming from COVID. Now, 52 million of that is in so-called designated reserves, and these are ones for which we have earmarked longer-term plans. That it includes scaling up charitable activities such as our surplus to purpose activities, and also investing in the longer-term financial health of the RSC. And I would highlight in that clearing the pension fund deficit. There is part of this earmarked, as you can see from the annual report, to ultimately completely clear the pension fund deficit at a point in the future. Lastly, we have around about 6 million in reserves tied up in property. That's mostly our site in Cambridge, Thomas Graham House. Moving on to the next slide. Just in conclusion on 2019, I would like to say overall it was a good financial performance from the business. We had strong revenue growth, and we managed to increase our support for the community of chemistry. We saw good performance from the investment portfolio, and we ended the year in a financially strong position. Now, in a normal year, I would sit back and invite questions. However, this is not a normal year. We can't leave this discussion without mentioning where we are. So if you look at the next slide, please. What are the effects so far of COVID-19? Well, the society is in good shape for 2020. It's only modest financial impact during this year. Clearly, there are some operating revenues at risk. That's been offset to a large extent by cost savings due to cancelled or postponed activities. We will, or we expect to, make some modest use of contingency reserves during the year. And we're currently estimating to spend a little under 2 million from reserves to support the RSC at the end of this year. However, cash flow remains healthy. There is some investment volatility, but that does not affect the day-to-day operations. And actually, we're up, as of last night, we are up year on year in the investment portfolio, year to date rather. Looking beyond 2020, undoubtedly there will be uncertainties in 2021 and beyond. The organisation is looking at the impact on customers that's being assessed. We're looking at trends in publishing, particularly article numbers, and the strategy and the priorities of the RSC will be reviewed. However, one thing that I must stress is that we remain confident of the ability of the RSC to adapt to a changing world. It has both the resources and the staff to adapt to the world as we see it evolving in future. So with that, that's all I wanted to say. I'm happy to take questions. I see that there was a question, or two questions rather, from Mr. Stanley Langer earlier. The one was we made no mention in the message from the Honorary Treasurer as part of the invitation to this meeting. We didn't make any mention on the pension fund status, which often happens. The reason for that is simply that the pension fund deficit was largely unchanged year to year. There was a movement of, I think, £100,000 in the deficit between 2018 and 2019. And we felt that didn't justify us making explicit mention of it. The other question from Mr. Langer on the pension fund was, have the assets been affected by COVID-19? Well, the assets of the pension funds are invested in the markets, as are the society's reserves. They were certainly affected by the turbulence that we saw during March. However, that proved to be a temporary reduction, and the assets of the pension fund have since recovered. Helen, do we have more questions? I can't see the questions list.
As relating to the finances, the only additional question that we've had is from Dr. Andrew Muddle, which is just to clarify what is the pension deficit, which I think you covered in the answer to Stanley's question, but if you can just clarify that answer.
It obviously will vary, and it depends on how you define it. It's probably better to say that we are in the process of doing the triennial valuation right now. So while, yes, I could give you an old number, but we'll soon have the up-to-date number. It was just a little under 20 million at the previous, the net deficit on an actuarial basis. but we will have the absolute up-to-date number shortly.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. And if there are no further questions, we will pass on to the adoption of the 2019 accounts, which was proposed by Duncan Graham and seconded by Jonathan Oxley. I now need to put the proposal to the vote. So could you please vote now? And I'll leave you for 2 minutes to do that. Okay, thank you very much. I hope you all had time to vote. We will announce the results at the end of this meeting. So we now move on to the election of members of Board of Trustees, boards and divisions. And you will see some slides with the winners of these elections presented. So first of all, the president, the board members and division presidents, and the division council members. So I'm hoping that you will be seeing some slides.
Carol, you are free to continue speaking.
You should note that the vacancies were actually noted in the update, and we have reports of our electoral service provided by My Voice and all the elections. These are available to members on request. So I now need to move on to section 5, item 5, which is the appointment of auditors. I propose that RSM be appointed as auditors of the RSC for 2021. I invite the Honorary Treasurer, Paul Satchell, to second the proposal.
I second that proposal.
And I need to put that proposal to the vote. So members, please vote. Pause briefly.
Thank you, Carol. You continue.
Okay, thanks. Okay, item 6, subscriptions. And I invite the meeting to note that the annual subscriptions payable by members of the RSC with effect from the 1st of January 21 is published in the AGM agenda. And now, item 7, my great pleasure to welcome the new president-elect and the president. So I invite you to welcome our new president-elect. We're delighted to present Professor Jill Reid. Jill, would you like to say something?
Thank you very much indeed, Carol. And good evening to all of the RSC members joining this AGM. I must say that I was delighted and undoubtedly a little bit stunned to hear the news, the result of the election. I've been fortunate to be involved with the RSC on many aspects over a number of years, including as an elected member of the Board of Trustees between 2011 and 2015. I'm genuinely honoured to have received the support of the RSC members to become president-elect. I really hope that I can do justice to the role in the coming years. I finished my role as head of chemistry at Southampton at the end of this month. And of course, I'm very much looking forward to joining the Board of Trustees, working alongside our incoming president, of course, Tom, and with both the staff and RSC members in the coming period. As everybody knows, the pandemic has brought an enormous number of challenges for all of us. And undoubtedly, there will be more to come as the obvious impacts on people's health and the world economy plays out. Chemistry has a really strong role to play in tackling these. And it's really an important time for us as a community to work together to champion the chemists, the chemistry as a discipline and the chemical sciences more widely. And I really look forward to being involved in that and working with you going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jill. And it also gives me great pleasure to welcome our incoming president, Professor Tom Welton, and to offer him every good wish for his presidency on behalf of the Royal Society of Chemistry, and to invite Tom to speak briefly.
So I would like to say cheers to everybody in the light of the thing that I just said before. But well, you know, what I'd like to say is it's an incredible honour that you, the membership, have decided to put your trust in me to help to steer the society over the next couple of years. And I even a year after the election, I still could not be more proud and delighted and excited about the opportunity that this affords me. You know, when I look at the list of previous presidents, you know, not least of all Carol, it's an incredible body of people who I am remarkably proud to now be counted in on. Yeah, as Jill has said, you know, we live in a very different world today to the one that we were living in this time last year when my election was announced. But I think it is a world in which, well, science in general and chemistry can absolutely thrive. I can't imagine that at any time in the past, I would have expected every evening on the BBC at 5 o'clock for scientists to stand up in front of the country and to explain to people what was happening. So yes, there are great challenges that come from COVID, but there are also great opportunities for chemists and chemical scientists to really make a positive impact on the world over the next few years. And I hope that together we get to do that.
Thank you very much, Tom. So item 8 on the agenda is the vote of thanks. And I would like to call on Tom again to propose a vote of thanks to the Royal Society of Chemistry, its employees and members for the great work and success achieved in 2019.
So, of course, we all need to thank not only the broader membership for all of the things that they have done over the last year, but particularly the things that they have been doing over the last 4 months to help improve the position of us and the broader society in the context of the lockdown that we've been experiencing. I've already alluded to the amazing work that the staff have done in transferring their activities from Thomas Graham House into their various kitchens, bedrooms, conservatories, sheds. And that was an amazing, amazing piece of work that they did. And I'm just staggered at the ability that they have had to keep the show very much on the road. I would absolutely pick out that the leadership team have done a great job of leading that movement. And of course, Helen, together with those, I can't imagine, so in January, Helen was thinking, well, whilst Robert is off having his hip replacements, if you're on the call, Robert, I do hope your hips are, or your hip is getting better. I think that what has happened in those years, and a fantastic job has been done by her, and of course, ably supported by Paul and the rest of the leadership team. And finally, of course, to thank you, Carol, for having been an amazing president and somebody, as I've just said, of whom I am immensely proud to follow on from.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. That's great. I now declare the business...
Pardon, we just need to close voting on both of those motions, please, and we can then display the results. Thank you.
I declare that the voting is now closed. I just need to receive the results. So resolution 1.
Oh, very nice.
100% adoption. So I'm happy with that. Thank you. Of the accounts.
Resolution 2, Carol, has passed with 99.7% in favour as well.
Okay, and resolution 2, 99.7%, just a small drop there, in favour. So thank you very much for voting, and I do now declare the meeting closed. And normal times I would invite you for a drink, but sadly not. But I will pass you to Helen, who has some other things to talk to you about.
Thank you very much, Carol, and thank you so much for hosting our AGM. As many of our viewers will recognise, this is very much an experiment for the RSC, but we are chemists, we're scientists, and experiments are good things because we learn as we go through. So Carol, I'd just like to, on behalf of the staff, say thank you very much for all of your support and inspiration as president. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you for the last 3 years, President-elect, and 2 years as President, but I know that we'll continue working together as you become immediate past President. I'd like to congratulate Jill and welcome you to the Board of Trustees. Again, we've worked together over many years, but Jill, I know you're going to bring something extra into the Board of Trustees, especially when you think about the work that you've done around outreach and advocacy for our younger members especially. And also to congratulate Tom. Tom and I have worked together again for a number of years with a shared background through university. So congratulations on becoming president. Best of luck for the next 2 years. Again, you'll be working very closely with the staff team, and we very much look forward to doing that with you. So before we do conclude this evening's event, I mentioned at the beginning that we would normally at our kind of meetings and celebrations over the summer be welcoming our honorary fellows. We do have 4 honorary fellows this year receiving their honorary FRSCs, and they are Professor Francis Arnold, Professor Dr. Natalia Tarasova, Dr. Tony Wood, and also Professor John B. Goodenough. And because they can't be with us this evening, they have very kindly agreed to film some videos. So we're now going to share with you the videos that they have recorded.
In fact, this news came to me during the closing ceremony of the International Year of the Periodic Table of Chemical Elements in Tokyo. And my first feeling was a surprise, because there are a lot of chemists all over the world who are working hard to promote our science. And then I felt a high degree of satisfaction, because in fact this honorary fellow was my first award for the International Year of the Periodic Table. And so I was so much touched by this decision of the Royal Society of Chemistry. I'm the 3rd Russian chemist who has received this highest award of the Royal Society. And the first 2 were men, and to some degree, this is to establish a gender balance among the awards given to Russian chemists. So this is my feeling. The whole idea of the International Year, it was a combination of the British and Russian minds. Because first the idea came from Sir Martin Polyakov. And Martin wrote that Mendeleev's discovery, it doesn't belong only to Russian science. It is one of the most outstanding achievements, and only in cooperation could the scientific community move forward and help human beings to survive in this complicated world.
As a chemist, the Royal Society of Chemistry is an extremely important body to me, particularly as a British chemist. And I believe it's probably one of the oldest chemical societies in the world, if not the oldest. And of course, my chosen profession, if you like, at the level of fundamental subject is chemistry. So it's a tremendous honor to be recognized by my peers, by those people who I've admired over the years as my career has developed. So it means a great deal. Importantly, at a community level, it was initially in my career a focal point for my peers as we developed our careers initially at university, and then some people went off to industries. I did. Some people took up academic careers. Behind all of that there was always the Royal Society of Chemistry in one way or another. As a scientist, I don't see national boundaries at all. I have colleagues and friends all over the world who I respect enormously, whose work I'm following because of the massive contributions that they make. I'm a big fan of a global community of science.
I'm absolutely thrilled, and I want to greet my colleagues in the UK here from sunny California, where I'm working from home and have been for the last few months. I'm dying to come to the UK. I can't wait to get on the road again and see my friends. It's unfortunate that we have to do it virtually. I'm really happy to be included in this Royal Society of some of the best chemists, human chemists, that is, in the world, and really the best chemists of our age. It's wonderful also to see the inclusivity of the Royal Society. Why you've even elected an engineer. UK chemistry has had such a long history of very innovative chemistry coming from different fields. And so I've had colleagues that I've collaborated with, visited, spoken to over the last 35 years. I've learned a lot from chemistry in the UK. I have many friends that I love to see. And so coming for the conference in Liverpool was a real highlight, because that had a great example of the breadth of the chemical field. It makes absolutely no sense to limit the possibilities of all members of society, right? Everyone should have a chance to contribute what they are able to contribute. Chemistry has benefited enormously from diverse inputs, from diverse ways of thinking. It's such a central science. It's so full of possibilities for innovation that we would be foolish to limit who can do chemistry.
So I hope you've enjoyed hearing from some of our inspirational honorary fellows, and obviously we'll be working with them over the next year or so, and hopefully you'll be able to hear even more from them in the coming years. So before we leave you this evening, I'd just like to say that we still have well over 400 people on the call, so 400 members who have stayed with us through the AGM, and that truly is a phenomenal number. Because of the numbers that we've had quite a lot of questions come through, so I am going to ask that we can take these questions and produce answers to them that we'll share with all of you after the meeting. But the questions that we've had are very varied, they're very insightful, asking about the shape of the membership, asking about the impact of COVID on the organisation, but also asking about the response from the UK, but also the wider research community as we go forward and deal with the impact of COVID. So we will certainly be coming back to you with all our thoughts and answers for those questions. And as you're aware, this is obviously the first time we've hosted this meeting online. We would actually like to hear your feedback, so please look out for opportunities to feed back to us, things that we can do differently and can improve on. I do think this will become a feature of AGMs going forward, and one of the really exciting things that we've realised is that our global reach has gone far and wide. So if there is any opportunity for you to share with us where you're actually joining us from, that would be really fascinating to learn too. I think if we've been able to reach past London, I think that's a very positive step forward, where normally in Burlington House we'd be able to attract probably about 50 people, so 400 is fantastic. Again, we'll be making the contents, the video, available online after the event, and we'll be sharing with you, as I say, the answers to those questions. And just to leave you, we really do wish you all the best for 2020. We hope you continue to work with us, and of course we will continue to support you, and very much hope that you'll continue to support us over the coming months and over the coming years. We are absolutely very much rewarded by working with you. We feel very proud to be part of the Royal Society of Chemistry. So all it remains for me to say is thank you very much for joining us, and we hope to be able to meet you in person very soon. Thank you and goodbye.